Hey guys, I just wanted to give a quick little preface to this episode. Last couple episodes we've had some issues with audio quality, and this one unfortunately was better, but not great either. So I spent a lot of time trying to edit this. There was probably 600 to 700 edits that I ended up having to do. Discord, which is our platform we were using for these interviews, something's going on with it, especially as of late, and it's not working out for us. It cuts the audio in weird spots. It adds background noise that we didn't hear during the broadcast. So for future episodes, we're actually going to try a new platform, and hopefully this is the last one you guys hear from us with the unfortunately less than ideal audio quality, although this one sounds a lot better now that I've edited everything and gone through it all. So apologize in advance. Hopefully I got most of it, if not all of it. The other thing to note for this episode is one of the mod developers that was developing the JAS 39 Gripen mod. That mod actually came out already, and we were talking about it as it was going to come out in the future. They actually used the words 2 weeks, which it actually turned out to be 2 weeks. So go them. I wanted to bring up that I was hoping to get this episode out before that actually happened, but because of the issues and all of the edits I had to do, it didn't happen. So, you'll be hearing them talking about the mod coming out in the future, but it is already out as of the release of this recording, and you can find it up on GitHub or the DCS forums. I'm sure somebody has a link. We'll try to post a link as well in the show notes. So go check it out, let them know, give them some feedback, and hope you guys enjoy the episode. And hopefully it's the last one that we have with the unfortunate audio quality. Enjoy.
Welcome to the Air Combat Simulation Podcast, brought to you by BVR Productions. Together with content creators, mission builders, experts, and enthusiasts, we explore the comprehensive world of combat aircraft simulation.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Air Combat Sim Podcast. Today we're going to go ahead and talk about the unofficial mod community. We've got some guests with us today. Actually, it's a pretty full house, so we'll see how this goes. I think this is probably the most people we've had on a podcast at the same time. So we'll give it a go and see what happens. But first, I'm just going to go top to bottom. We have Breadmaker, and I think you're part of the Gripen team. Is that right, Breadmaker?
That's correct.
How you doing today?
I'm doing good. A bit tired. I've had party for my kids the whole weekend, but I'm all good.
Awesome. Well, thank you for showing up and being here with us.
Yep. Thanks for being here.
Next, we have Casmo. How you doing, Casmo?
I'm doing great, as always.
Hopefully you don't need an introduction. Most people probably know you.
Oh, tens of people know me.
Tens of people?
Yeah,
awesome.
at least.
Hopefully one of those people was from having you on here.
At least one.
Glad you can make it today.
Thank you.
Next we have Goat or Rob. How you doing?
Good, man. Good. I think it is the Casmo compared to all the others. Yeah. So it is.
Wait, are you the Casmo?
The only one that I know of.
Okay.
No, I don't know.
I always get that. Are you the Jabbers? Is there another one? There's another Jabbers out there? I've kind of never seen that.
Yeah.
And then we have Matt. Matt, you were from the C-130 Hercules mod, I believe.
Yes, I am.
Is that right? How you doing?
Living the dream here.
Where's here?
Wyoming. Jackson Hole, Wyoming.
Wow. There's only one dream, and it's shared across everybody.
Exactly. Yeah.
I've never met anybody from Wyoming before.
Well, now you have.
Nice.
I was going to say, you're probably the only representative on this podcast for as long
That's
as it'll
correct.
live from Wyoming.
Yeah. Well, yeah, there's this pandemic thing that you might have heard about, and I was living in New York, and I thought, I think I don't want to live here anymore, so I left.
Oh, wow.
So I live here.
Can we do the whole podcast on Wyoming itself?
I think we can.
I would
Not
except for
advisable,
Jackson
but-
Hole.
Yeah,
Short
that's
episode.
pretty much all I know too. I think the rest of the state is just it's just flat. Not sure there's
Nice.
anything else there.
Well, thank you for being here, and we'll talk about your mod shortly. And next we have Particle Man from the T45 mod. I think I got that right.
Hello,
Is that right?
hello. Yeah, VNAO simulations is what we go by.
I guess I should reference your guys' actual team names, but I didn't write
Oh,
that
it's fine.
down.
Yeah, we basically started up a sim channel, a sim like offshoot of the VNAO DCS group air wing kind of a thing, where we do as close as we can to real Navy training for aviators, and we decided that we needed a better training jet, and so that's where the T-45 came from.
Awesome. Well, it's been fun to use that mod for sure. I think me and Tricker had some good fun.
We had a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I believe it involved multiple rolls and catching a 3-wire all at the same time.
Probably the best trap I've ever seen in my life.
It was pretty good. And then last we have oh no, we get Tricker. I guess I'll introduce Tricker. I mean,
Yeah,
yes.
I've been talking already. Tricker's here. Hey, everybody.
How you doing, Tricker? What have you been up to, man?
I just got back from the gym, so I'm
nice.
here.
So you're all swole?
Yeah, and sweaty.
Nice. That's how I like you.
Thank you.
Next we have Vine Dog, also from the Gripen team. How you doing, Vine Dog?
What's good, my dudes? Yeah, I'm Vine Dog, representing Lion Eagle Simulations. Currently working on the community Gripen mod, as well as a couple other mods to be mentioned at a later date.
When the Gripen mod's coming out pretty soon, right?
2 weeks, actually, 2 weeks.
Ooh.
No,
Hear that?
no jokes about it.
We're gonna have to. I'm gonna start the clock. We're gonna see about
Yeah.
that.
Feel free to start holding your breath.
Sounds good.
How do you come up with the name Vine Dog anyway? It's pretty cool.
It was an old AOL name back when I was 13.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
It wasn't
it's a
from.
mix of my last name and Dowg.
Nice.
Ooh, Dowg.
It's
Rapper.
Dowg.
It's not because you were
Vine
like
Dowg.
a big Vine fan. Remember that social
No,
platform?
Vine is the first half of my last name.
Oh, okay. So let's talk a bit about the process of creating the mods that you guys have developed. I think there's all sorts of mods in DCS. There's extra assets to use, changes to things that already exist. But I think the biggest thing and probably the hardest thing is adding new actual modules that are flyable in DCS. New planes, new helicopters. Have we seen a helicopter mod?
Yeah, the Little Bird was actually developed by the engineer who helped us create the T-45 Nibby lot. So he's the only one that I'm aware of that gave the community a standalone EFM for creating helicopters. And I think there's a few people who are creating some helicopters off of it right now, even though it is kind of broken right now with 2.7, only because it needs to be updated for the new code. But that's the only one that's out there that exists to my knowledge.
There's a whole bunch of people using that mod.
H53 the other day.
Yeah, that's
Yep,
one that's
yep.
based off of that.
Got it.
That's pretty cool. That'd be cool to see some helicopters. I haven't actually thought about that. I always see the planes and just go for the planes, but I don't really browse the forums too much to see what's really out there. I wait until somebody points it.
That's your bias kicking in.
It is.
Yeah, that's
no,
the
it
curse
is.
of the helicopter is nobody thinks about us.
Yeah.
Well, there's also an AH1 mod that came out the other day.
Really?
Hmm.
There's a lot of
Yeah,
mods
on the
around.
user files.
Oh, okay. I'll have to look that up. I usually wait until somebody says, "Hey, did you check this out?" Just because there's so much stuff out there, I don't have the time to browse it all myself.
No joke. I check the user every morning with the news as I wake up.
Oh,
Swear
okay.
to God.
I used to have the I have Discord called Splash One Gaming, and I do have a bot that I made for it, and it posts the news and all sorts of stuff. But I used to have it browse the user files and post everything new to a channel, whenever something new came out. But I found that they seem to release everything all at the same time, and so you'd get this channel that would just get spammed. Rather than, hey, here's a new thing, every couple hours. It's just like, hey, here's the 50 new things. It just was unmanageable.
You said you check the mods every morning. Where do you do that at? I'm asking for a friend.
I just check the user files, and the thing with the user files is you got to go a couple pages deep each day because it takes them time to approve. So it's not just like what's on the first page is what just came out. Sometimes you got to go a page or two deep.
Yeah, it's all
This is
manually
something that-
approved.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't know. So
So, I guess the first question I have is, given the fact that you guys don't necessarily have an SDK to work with, I mean, you don't, right? There's no
Nope.
real direction for the mods you guys make, right? It's just all exploration of the current code base.
I'd say it's about 50% collaboration amongst the teams, and the rest is a bunch of loopholes and walk around.
Yeah, there's a lot of people. There's a couple of people who aren't in here, like the developer, the A4, who's done a lot of exploratory work to find things that were only thought to be available with the third-party developer SDK. There is an SDK, and I'm not an engineer by trade. There are obviously engineers in this discussion, so they can speak closer to it. But we don't have access as non-third-party developers to the actual engine code to do some of the things like multi-crew sync, the way that it's done in the base simulator. But I know Matt for specifically has a little bit more experience with engineering than I do, because we've talked, and he actually helped us out with the T45 with our initial release to kind of get through the 2.7 hurdles.
Basically, there's the EFM API, and that's really all that's public. But that lets you put basically, an event loop, an update loop in C++. And then the Lewis stuff, I mean, it's kind of like it's like folk wisdom.
Yep.
Like you sort of look at what other people have done, and then you figure out, oh, there's that variable that's exposed, and I don't know, just sort of adds up. But the EFM stuff is really kind of where it gets interesting, because you can put arbitrary code in there. I mean, it's an API, it's the model that you can run with.
EFM stands for
External flight model.
right?
Yeah, so that's like the flight model API that ED themselves use or Heapler uses, and that's what they make public. The headers for that are in the game base install.
Okay, so just to try to break everything down for people who don't know, and especially people who don't code, DCS has multiple different flight models that you can develop against. One is called the SFM, which is simplified flight model, correct? That is
That's right.
That is actually what I believe the AI probably uses.
Yes,
it's kind of UFO-y, and it doesn't do things that a normal flight model would, or you would expect from a flight model. And then they have the next level up. It would be the EFM, correct?
Yeah. So EFM describes like a method more than an actual thing. It's the use of the API that Eagle Dynamics provides to basically implement physics on an object.
And it works. Maybe you don't have access to the code. You're just telling it, here, use this, but it does more stuff than the simplified flight model, obviously, because it's like night and day.
And what the code and the sort of instruction set for that is actually available to anybody that wants it. That's the one part of this sort of walled garden that ED makes public.
I've seen that. That's actually included in the base install.
Correct.
And that's you have to do C++ for that, I think.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then the next level up, I believe, which is completely hidden to us, is actually the PFM, which is as far as I know, it's called professional flight model. Is that what they?
PFM, as I understand it, describes an implementation of an EFM model. So it uses the same EFM toolset. It's just that it has met some standard for quality and accuracy.
I see. Okay, that's cool. So what about the multi-crew stuff? So there's nothing for that publicly.
No.
So how do you guys get around that? I mean, at a high level, obviously, let's remember that we're talking to people who don't have or may not have the technical knowledge that some of you guys have.
Yeah, ours is wild. I mean, we it's pretty easy to set up in the files to define that there's like a second seat in this plane. What you can't do normally is like synchronize switches or have like collaboration between the different crew members. And so what we did was we start just an actual web server in the EFM code, and I don't even know how to talk about getting into like code stuff, basically, but we run a web server and connect the two people physically like over the internet and send data back and forth across the wire.
That makes sense.
About who's clicked which switches. Yeah.
So you guys basically start your own network. Like you connect to a multiplayer server, and all of that data goes to the multiplayer server. But you guys create a network that goes peer to peer, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's how you're doing the syncing. That's pretty wild.
Thanks for dumbing it down for me.
You're welcome.
I said, most aspects of modding, it's loopholes, walkarounds, and coding black magic.
Interesting. I know Keepler, talking to Keepler, they had to do some of the same kind of stuff for the Rio seat to
yeah, I bet,
work around some of the issues they had. Interesting.
Yeah, it's real quick. I just want to interject. And so that's specific to the Hercules. And so, we don't have that system on the T45, which I'm sure people are aware of. So what you see in the T45 is a la the 339, which is another great freeware, which is gone payware aircraft. And we've been in contact with those developers, VNAO, and we've talked a lot about it when we were developing the 45, and we have the same kind of limitations. And so what you're seeing with the 45 is like the extent of before going to what Matt's created in the Hercules code set with that peer-to-peer system is about what you're going to get if you don't do that, is what we see in the T45, which is the gear syncs, the handle syncs, the desyncs, and stuff like that.
And mostly it's syncing problems.
Yes, mostly syncing issues. The systems are actually working; they're just not synchronized.
Yeah, there's like nothing at all in the base, in like at least the part of the environment that we have access to that handles synchronization at all. That's all you have to roll your own.
Interesting. That's pretty cool. I mean, that shows the commitment to the community to try to figure all this stuff out, and it's awesome that you guys all share that between yourselves, because we probably wouldn't have half the mods we have now if that weren't the case.
I mean, I kind of have like a quick question. So like, well, it's probably not really quick, but if somebody brand new wanted to get into like modding, is there like a go-to guide or like a Discord or something that somebody brand new can be like, hey, I need this information to figure something out?
There is a modding Discord. There's a couple of them, but there's one that's fairly easy to get to. And if anybody wants to know what I'm talking about, feel free to message me, Blind Dog, on the Gripen mod server. There's a lot of very solid modders that are on there. There's also a decent amount of information that's through and read. Just keep in mind that the learning curve is fairly steep, but the community is incredibly generous. And if you show a desire to actually get some work done yourself, guaranteed 90% of the time you reach out to somebody, they'll at least point you in the right direction or even help you along. And that's the experience I've had.
And don't forget to check the pinned stories before you start asking a bunch of questions, because there's a lot of pinned information in that. It's actually called the DCS modding hub.
Mm-hmm.
I actually got it highlighted right now, but that's where most of us, I think, in this chat actually are part of, and we've gleaned a lot of information out of there.
Cool.
That's where I got started as well.
You can send me the Discord invite to that, and I can we'll include that in the show notes or something.
Is there a skill set? What's the base skill set that somebody needs to get going in something like this?
Yeah, I mean, it's really two different types of things. I mean, you can be involved in one of two sides: the 3D art side, which probably has a little bit of an easier on ramp, and then there's the the code side, and then within the code side, there's really folks that maybe are familiar with scripting, like in the Lua language, like for mission design. And I think a lot of people they get comfortable writing Lua code to make some sort of a dynamic mission. And then, but then there's the C++ stuff, which is where I think, at least for me, the really kind of cool stuff starts to happen. And from there, it's, that learning curve is steep if you're not a software engineer.
There's also the 2D livery art portion of it. It may not be considered pure modding, but I'd say the vast majority of people who create content are either making missions or liveries, and that's greatly appreciated and scratches kind of the same itch as like painting a model airplane. And that's personally where I got started, is either through GIMP or Photoshop making liveries.
I'd also say it depends on what kind of mod you want to do. I'm part of the Gripen team, and we are team of people with different skill sets. I work on the 3D model basically, but I mean you can do very simple mods. I did a wind turbine, which is basically a 3D model with some blades spinning around, and that's very easy to code, especially if you take help from the modding hub, and then you can, if you only want to do simple mods, you can do it with pretty basic skills. But if you want to do something more advanced, of course, you need to know more or be a part of a team.
Is that
So,
why
yeah.
your name is Bread Maker? You made a windmill to make flour?
Yeah, no, the bread maker name is actually a long story. If anyone's curious, they're free to contact me. But yeah, let's say for now it's about windmills. Yeah, that's a good explanation.
I know. Go ahead.
I just wanted to, in talking about, you don't have to make, that windmill reference for modding is actually a good point, because not only did we do the T45, but we actually started our first public mod release with a VR ready room, which we were kind of exploring, and that was based on Nibby Lot's Little Bird. It actually is a helicopter, but we stuck a room onto it, and it's actually a 25-player multi-crew helicopter that allows you to sit in there, and we do VR. We basically, you don't have to have VR, it can be track IR or VR, but we can actually support 25 people in there, synchronized with like PowerPoint briefing slides that are all synchronized across the server, so that you basically say, okay, everybody download this slide pack, put it in this folder in the mod, and then when you get in there, when somebody goes to slide 2, it's like an intel map from the mission that's coming up, and so somebody can actually stand at the podium. There's no players in there right now visually, but they're actually in there, and they can dim the lights, and they can change the slides, and SRS actually works in there as well, so you can actually hear people talking if you want to that are flying. But that's another approach to it that doesn't have to necessarily be an aircraft. You can build things other than aircrafts, and that's kind of the extreme of a non-aircraft mod. But it's completely possible to do other things than a full aircraft mod.
That's pretty cool. I know that a buddy of mine, Grinelli, actually tried to get him to come on here, but I didn't get a response from him. He's the guy that did the F-22 mod. He's done a couple other things, but he started doing just liveries and got involved in the community there and worked his way up to actually doing a lot more. So, I mean, that's kind of a testament to what you guys were saying, where a lot of the people, and you guys in particular, also said that you started with some other stuff and then worked your way on up. It's pretty cool.
I'd say the best, if you're trying to get into modding, the best way is to try to do static objects. They're the simplest to make 3D wise and the easiest to get in game. And I have a ton of static objects mods that I use in my missions all the time, and they're greatly appreciated. If it be like a ladder for a jet, or a generator to get it started, or like a trailer with missiles on it. I mean, those tiny little things are fairly easy to make modding wise, and they're hugely appreciated, at least as far as I'm concerned. And that's a really great way for you to make something fairly simple with a manageable learning curve, and still be able to kind of get something out there for people to enjoy.
Like an IKEA building.
I was going to say an example would be the DCS cow. Then how would you make that animated? Like, is that a different program?
You actually animated.
The moment animated gets into a whole nother. Go ahead, Brad.
Yeah. Animation is actually done partially in the 3D program. You use arguments, it's called, and then the animation gets a number, the number for the animation itself, and then a value from -1 to +1, what it should do, and then you define that with some code, how it should work.
Extremely tedious.
Yeah, but the point, just quick into that 3D section of things, to make a cow, have the legs move and the tail and the head and all that. You're talking about building a full skeletal rig for the thing, which means putting a skeleton into it, then weighting the model to that rig, then having knowledge of animation. So it just starts going down a huge rabbit hole when you start going down things like having a pilot walk around or look or go into a pose. All the carrier deck crew is I think it's mocap data that's parented to and translated to skeletal rigs. You can see it starts going down a huge rabbit hole when you talk about things like that. It's a lot of work, and it takes a lot to get it right.
Yeah, but when you get a cow on a carrier, there's nothing more satisfying.
Yeah, that's what it's all about.
Yeah, it pays for itself. So
That's legendary.
We should also mention for all of those who are interested in doing mods, it's pretty simple if you know a little bit of how to do it to get started. Like you said, Vindog, to make a static object and just put it in the game. And that's a very rewarding feeling. And if you start with something simple, you can always learn the next step after that. So people shouldn't feel that, I need to know how to program an advanced 5th-gen fighter jet to start doing mods. No, that's not the truth. You can actually start with something simple and then learn from that.
You can do one thing and get good at it, and then you can join a team. Because the vast majority, if not all, of the quality mods out there are a team effort. It's hundreds of combined hours, everyone using up their free time and putting something together. So the vast majority of these mods are hundreds and hundreds of combined hours with multiple team members working together and getting tasks done. And that's a big part of the joy of doing it too, is you get to meet people along the way and you get to collaborate and get a great piece of virtual art together.
Well, what is the motivation? So that's what I don't know what the word I'm looking for. I don't say struggle, but you guys just said hundreds upon hours, of individuals working together for something that you're putting out for free. Like, what is the long-term goal? Is it literally just it's your art and you just like doing it, or is there a view towards making it something where it's a money-making business? Like what's the motivations?
I think it's both in some cases, but you have to like doing this. I mean, if you don't like DCS and airplanes and software or art, this is not going to be something that you want to do.
Yeah.
I think for most of us, it's the intersection of all those things that makes it compelling. I don't get to program airplanes in my day job. If I did, I probably wouldn't be doing this.
Right.
But yeah, I think for some mods and for some groups, there's an eye towards maybe commercialization. But that's definitely not normally, I think, how it starts.
I feel like it's ultimately a passion for aviation. I feel like that's the base that kind of combines us all together. Combined with investing your time in a hobby that actually produces something of value. And for me personally, I've for years have enjoyed the work of others and just wanted to do my personal little share in order to give something to the table in my own little way. So but first and foremost, it's a passion for aviation. You have to be passionate about it.
I think it also helps to like the project you're working on. Like for us, I'm a Swedish guy working on the Gripen. I will probably never fly a real Gripen in the real life, and waiting for an official Gripen for the DCS is going to take years if it's ever going to be available. So working on making an airplane or a building or a helicopter or a vehicle or anything that you actually would like to see in the game, that's a big motivation, at least for me, and probably for many others. And also the feeling of knowing that other people will appreciate it, that other people will finally get to fly their dream plane in DCS and share that experience. It's a good motivation.
Yeah, I think it's actually a good point. Like, I think that a lot of people, if they've learned to program, and probably the same with art, is like the best motivator for sort of working through that learning curve is like a problem that you personally want solved, and the only way to solve it is to learn Python or something. And like at least for me with like the Hercules, like how I got involved was I thought it was awesome. I have like an open world server and mission that I run with a group of friends, and we always wanted logistics. And Hueys are fine, but you fly 200 miles in a Huey, that's not going to be a great time. So we wanted a plane. We saw this, and it was just like, holy shit, this is amazing. Want to get involved.
Yeah. Is flying 200 miles in a Huey, is it really not a great time, Casmo?
No, that's a terrible distance.
In
Having to
any
pee.
helicopter?
Yeah, that's awful.
Especially if you get shot down 10 minutes before reaching the landing zone.
Yeah,
That's
or you
always
lag
fun.
out or something. God bless. Yeah.
Yeah. Breadmaker, exactly to speak what you just said about creating something that you know you're probably never going to see in DCS. Let's be realistic. There are a few jets that DCS will never make, just because it doesn't. It's not a return on investment that they see as something. And one of the things that we did with the T-45 and the Ready Room, I'll speak to both of them, is in our group, like I said, we like to teach and train to what the Navy does for their new pilots, and we have a lot of people in Vienna. We welcome new pilots who have either never flown before, are very young, or just want to understand how the Navy works and how planes take off, launch and recover off of a carrier. I mean, because that's the sexy stuff that everybody wants to do and be part of. And you're talking about many, 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 many years of training and study to be able to actually do that. And we're like, well, we had a bunch of cadets coming in, and they're like, they are completely overwhelmed with the F-18. And we're like, let's create a platform that is more entry level, that gets them into a fast jet so they can do the real stuff that actually happens in the Navy without having to be overwhelmed by all the, RWRs, the SA, all the crap that, this weapon systems, how to start the jet up. It takes 2 minutes to start this jet up, opposed to the 18 where you've got to align, systems. And we wanted to cut all that out. And so that's where we were like, we can create this platform. And that's where we just started running with it, not knowing, still not completely sure where we want to go with the project in real terms yet, because we've generated a lot of interest in it, which is great. But, we more importantly wanted to create something that everyone could get into. You can basically download DCS for free, download our plane right now, and have a multi-crew experience to instruct new pilots off of. And that was the entire goal of our project.
Smart man.
I feel like you guys have succeeded for sure.
And it's interesting to me too, because you guys created that for the purpose for your group, and yet you shared it with everybody. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of mod developers are like, yeah, we created this amazing project, but it's private. And you're just like, then please just keep it to yourself. Like, I get that you want to show off your work, but if you're going to go neener, it's our toy, you're literally going back to grade school, and it's not cool. I mean, I talk to many developers who do that, and I'm just like, what are you doing? Like, give the community back, because you obviously learned and got to where you are by other people being generous and sharing with you. And to create something and just hold on to it, I feel is a little bit tough. Real quick, and then I'll let somebody else talk. One of the things that we have been entertaining with the 45 is one thing we would love to do, and we have reached out to ED, is we want the T-45, whether it's in this capacity or in the future, to possibly be part of the base sim that you get for free, so that you get the 15, the Mustang, and possibly this one. I can't tell you how many super carrier modules that we have sold for ED with this mod. I know for a fact we've probably sold hundreds of them, because I get messages from people every day and groups every day who are like, we're adopting this for our entire training wing. We have a couple dozen pilots, and everyone now is required to buy the super carrier mod. And I was like, great. I see none of that money, but enjoy.
Have you gotten any feedback from them yet?
Yeah, I'm not going to share it here publicly, but yes, we have gotten feedback.
If I may, Particle Man, if I may, I want to segue into what you said. That leads into a question that I feel like a vast majority of the viewers have, and that is, why are so many mods kept private? And so, like you, Particle Man, before I got into modding myself, I would ask myself that question and get incredibly frustrated. Actually, what got me into modding is the fact that a particular mod that I saw available of my favorite airplane, he wasn't willing to share.
Right.
And that's actually what got me into modding. And so the question is, why are so many mods being kept private? And I feel like the answer, the majority of the time, is due to aspects of the mod that prevent the mod from being made public, as opposed to the modder himself just selfishly not wanting to share. And if I may, let's segue into that a little bit, because I feel like that's, a big issue that frustrates a lot of the community, as it
Yeah.
had frustrated me.
I mean, I'm not going to speak to specific mods because I'm
Exactly.
not going to do that. But what I will say is that there are some mods out there, current and past mods, that have. There was a point. I'll say this: there was a point at which ED decrypted a lot of their code. Either they accidentally released an in-house build publicly, and for a limited time, for about a month and a half, you could spin off versions of some of the retail aircraft. And this is not a secret. Everybody in this room who is a modder is aware of this. And you could literally take, let's say, the base F-18 module, for instance, and rename a bunch of the base code in there, the Lua, without having to, edit the DLL, which you can't do anyway unless you are doing illegal stuff. But the point is you could spin that off so that you could not only have the F-18C, but you could say the F-18 Growler, the G, and you could have those side by side flying. Right now, they've locked that back down. And so there are things like that you no longer can do, for better or worse, with the simulation code. But I think that those are the kind of things that would prevent people. Like, for instance, you couldn't distribute that Growler because it includes proprietary code from the base paid simulation stuff. So anything that somebody says I'm keeping private, it usually uses content from one of the paid modules, and that's probably why it's not going public.
There's also the aspect of models or assets that are being taken from other platforms.
Yes, that is another.
So essentially, the way copyright laws work and intellectual property laws work is whatever you do personally for yourself on your own computer, it's all kosher. But the moment you release something to the general public, you get yourself into a bit of a quagmire of legal issues. So more often than not, a mod is kept private because being made public would ruin the mod.
Correct.
Because of certain assets or codes that are being used within the mod.
Yeah.
More often than not. And so, and also these are things, a modder won't be able to discuss the particular reason why a mod is being kept private for fear of drawing attention to those exact reasons and having the whole mod get shut down, or modding in general. I mean, we've all seen the Great Mod Purge.
Right.
Yeah. So it's more often than not, it's not a selfish decision; it's a self-preservation decision.
Exactly. Yes, that's a great way to put it.
I think there might also be. There are many private mods in the DCS airshow community that are mods like the Red Arrows. They have their own Hawk and so on.
Yeah.
And it might be because you want to make a mod, you want to show it maybe in an airshow or in a trailer or in a video or for your group or anything. You want to show it to people, but you don't want to be responsible for like developing it so that the public will be pleased with it. As soon as you release something to the public, there's also like, of course, you can release it and then not care what people say. But when we release our Gripen, people are going to have opinions, and if we want to keep developing it and have a community using it, we need to meet those opinions, at least in some sense. And therefore, you might want to have a mod private so that you and your group can use it, and you might want to show it, but not release it because there might be issues that you are not willing to deal with.
Even to that point, a lot of those mods, and not all of them, obviously, some of them are quite in depth, but a lot of those mods are just external things.
Yes.
Like it's back in the day before the F-16 came out, we had the Thunderbirds, and they had an F-16 mod, but I don't know one way or another, but it could have been, for all I know, a skin on the F-15, and they're really just flying the F-15 in formation all day long. Same
Right.
thing with maybe. I know that the Virtual Blue Angels had an actual F-18C mod, I believe, but most of the stuff in it didn't work. They only made it work for what they needed for their demo, and they never planned on doing more than that. And so if you release that to the public, then then people will be like, "Oh, I want this system, or I want that, or why doesn't it have weapons? Why doesn't it?" And then it just becomes snowball of, well, that's not what the intended purpose was.
That's basically my point. Even if it's sponsored, even if it's exactly like the real aircraft, you might not want to release it to the public because you don't want to deal with that.
Well, I mean, I think there's also this broader view of, support, right? And what does the operational support for that product look like over the long term? So if somebody wins a lottery and you don't see them anymore, what happens to the module? And I think that's a fair question to talk about support in the long term.
And I think that has a lot to do with, why ED won't just include mods in their base install, because the second they do, there's an upkeep, whether it's from the third-party developer or them, and to some degree. I mean, look at some of the mods from the past. A new version comes out, and I don't want to name names, but you probably figure out who we're talking about. New version of ED comes out, and so didn't get their code checked in, and now that paid mod is broken. You know what I mean? Like that happens. And it's got to be frustrating for ED, because here they want to support, third-party developers, but they can only support them as far as they can handle the workload as well. Because if that third-party developer leaves, then, now they have a paid module, or even if it's free, there's something in the base game where they have to support it.
And it's also their name on it, right? I mean, I think like to some degree, maybe people are aware of different, third-party developers, but probably the majority of people just see DCS, pay $50 here, and that's ED's name on it.
Yeah, I mean, especially new people. Once you get into the world, of DCS, you realize, there's third parties, and we have Heapler, we have Razbam, we have everybody else. But yeah, you're right. From an external point of view, looking in from somebody who's never dealt with DCS before, they're like, oh, look, it's the F-14, Eagle Dynamics, DCS world. That's all they see.
Right.
That also brings us to another point. Updates are an immense double-edged sword for the modding community. On one hand, we're immensely appreciative of, new features, and we also, as coders, understand that in order to get a new feature out, sometimes you have to rewrite, base features. And so every time a new update comes out, we're excited about it, but we're also like frantically running around and talking to each other, like, what did it break? What doesn't work? What do we need to do to make it work in this new update? And that just adds a whole nother layer of work onto making a mod accessible to the community.
That's actually interesting to me, because I'm a software engineer by trade. I understand the logistics in creating a public API and the consequences of what happens when you change something. And so usually what happens is you would, forewarn everybody, hey, if you're using this version, in this version, that these functions are going to get deprecated and you can't use them anymore. But usually there's a long period of time. You might say it's deprecated but not obsolete, meaning we're not going to support it. You can still use it, but at some point in the future, we're going to obsolete that API.
Wouldn't that be great?
But to my point, it doesn't seem like that ever happens from ED's perspective, and maybe rightfully so, because they don't have to support you guys. They really only need to deal with the third parties that are approved, and there's not very many of them. So it's probably easier to send out a message to, I don't know how many we have now. We have like 6 or 7 now, maybe 8 or 9. Yeah. You send out a message to them and you say, hey, when we move from 2.7 to 257 to 258, we're going to obsolete these APIs. Make sure you're ready. That's probably not such a big deal. Whereas if they opened up third-party modules stuff to everybody from an API perspective, that would be a much bigger task for them on their side to make sure that all of the old code doesn't break, as long as, as well as adding new code.
I mean, I think what's kind of interesting about it, though, from a communications perspective, is like, it still happens, right? I mean, they can say that you're not supporting the community, but if you break all of the mods in the community, that still, I think, fosters discontent towards ED. And so there have been times where it's felt to me like, oh, come on, like, throw us a bone and just like tell us, hey, you have to change, this function call in the EFM, to this other one, kind of thing. But most of that stuff is kind of word of mouth now.
Yeah, that's really interesting, especially since they published that API.
Right.
I mean, they have a project.
Yeah, it doesn't exactly have a change log, let's say. I think with 2.7, the way that you make a draw call to the flight control surfaces of the external part of the plane changed, and it changed in this like very minor way. But you had to dig through like, I don't know, it was like a 2,000 line C++ file for this comment that says, oh, you need to use this new one. And that's actually, I found that and then pinged Particle Man. That was actually the first time we talked.
Saved our butt.
Yeah, and I was like, hey, I found this weird thing, and that's why your plane isn't going to work, why the rudder won't move. So just like change this one thing. And that's how a lot of it works.
I mean, I've learned a lot here in the last 20 minutes, but we're talking about other people's modules. Let's talk about your modules. I'm curious about the Gripen. So, I mean, can you guys tell us what's coming? IKEA and Swedish meatballs?
Yep. Yeah, we actually replaced the gun to a meatball dispenser.
That's
shoot
smart.
tomato
That's
sauce, or?
smart. Yeah.
Yeah, no. I mean, Binder, you're more of the leader of the project than I am. I'm a 3D modeler and animator, but yeah, we're making the Gripen, an early version, I think, to start with, and then we're moving on and developing it like as much as we can, basically.
So initially, what we decided to do with the Gripen mod is, in order to get something in the community's hands sooner, the whole process that I decided to take the team on is I wanted to get something basic and polished to get into the community's hands so that they can enjoy. And we have a broad, long roadmap of a lot of things that we want to put into the mod in a future point in time. But so we are going to release in 2 weeks. Actually, in 2 weeks, on the 6th of the 6th, 2021. It's going to be a basic modified SFM, custom weapons, custom 3D model, custom animations, custom cockpit. And so we're going to get a basic version of all of those things out there. If anyone wants more specifics of specifically what they're going to get in V1, I welcome them to hop on our Discord and check us out. And so we're going to get a clean, essentially bug-free, hopefully, version out for people to play and enjoy. And as people are enjoying the mod, we are going to significantly push forward to have many more features, including clickable cockpit, custom radar, maybe a couple more custom weapons, an EFM, some other variants. So for this point in time, we're going to have the C. I'm working on, we already have a model for the D that we're going to get, the D is the two-seater that we're going to get for future releases. And we'll see how far we can get it. So once again, the version you're going to get right now is a version that we're trying to get as clean as possible in your hands for you to enjoy. It's going to be essentially like an FC3 variation. You're going to have an air-to-air and an air-to-ground version. And while everyone's enjoying the first version, we are going to continue chugging along with tons of new features and continual updates as we go along. And so we're really, really excited about it. This is a fantastic plane, and we're excited to have something in your hands soon.
That's gonna be really cool. Can't wait for that. Can I just interject real quick though? I got 3 things
Sure.
to ask. Number one, you said bug free. Doubt.
Right. So you're going to have some.
Let
bugs.
him believe. It can happen.
We'll have some bugs. That is inevitable. But one of the reasons why we're pushing for a relatively basic version of what we want initially is so that you can get something that you can actually enjoy and have. So that's the reason why we're getting something relatively basic compared to what we ultimately want to do for the initial release. And also, the feedback from the community is going to greatly help us improve the quality of the mod.
Yeah, I just wanted to.
It's not just a picture, right?
No,
That's the basic.
Just
I would
wanted to
actually-
play on that one.
That might be bug free. That would be.
Yeah, I mean, software right never has bugs. So I'm sure Jackers.
Yeah.
Same with you, right? It's other people's software that has bugs.
Yeah, there's no features in my
mine doesn't. Yeah, exactly.
Well, there's a saying here: when a dancer can't dance, he says the floor is crooked. So if there's bugs,
Exactly.
the problem is with your computer. Not
Exactly. The second question I had is: you said EFM later. Are you going? You're going SFM first, and then you'll implement an EFM.
Yeah, so we're going to have a modified SFM. We actually have a pilot of the Czech Air Force that is testing it out and and giving us some information. So it is not just going to be an F-15 that looks like a Gripen. It's going to actually fly as close as an SFM allows us to fly, and also as close as the information we have available to us. So it's going to fly as close as possible, given those two restrictions initially. And this was a decision that was made because an EFM it's quite complicated. It's one of the most intricate aspects of making a mod. So we decided to go SFM initially in order to get the mod in people's hands sooner. But we've already started on an EFM. We have a coder who has a good amount of experience with those. We have firsthand individual, a pilot that will help us make it as accurate as possible. So you can definitely expect to see an EFM eventually. But initially it will be a modified SFM.
Yeah, it actually flies pretty good already. I did a test flight, and we invited our community to be part of it, and we streamed it and flew around and did some maneuvers, some loops and spins and all of that. And it actually flies pretty good. It's nothing like as soon as you say it's an FC3 mod, you expect it to fly like a UFO and not feel like a fighter yet. But I think this really does. I have no idea how a real Gripen feels, but I'd say it's pretty good. But of course, it's going to be much better when the EFM is ready.
And then you said a 2-seater variant later.
Yeah,
Yes,
we're working on it. In the real airplane, the 2-seater is for training only.
Right.
There's no Rio or Wizzo or anything. It's for training, but it looks very cool, and it's there in real life, and it would be awesome to be able to have it as a 2-seater. It could also be used for training in DCS, maybe.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's coming.
That's cool.
Of a fetish for 2-seater fighter jets. I don't know what it is, but they just look better to me with a guy in the back seat.
Doubt.
What about
So
a woman
I
in the
pushed
back seat?
hardcore. Yeah, someone to watch you.
He said it was a fetish.
I was about to ask that, Casmo.
Die by the sword.
Asmo, you read my mind.
So I have a question for all these modules. So we had a Gripen guy is testing it out. I know for the T-45 there was some involvement by people who had flown them.
Yes.
What about for what other modules do we have here? C-130.
Yeah. We have subject matter experts that have worked with us. A couple folks that are active duty, flying the Hercules now. A couple people that have flown it. It's a lot easier for us, I think, than other mods, though. The C-130 is super widely exported. It's been in service in some version or another for 50 years, and so it's not too hard to find people that have time in the seat. But it's also it's a 4-engine prop plane, which doesn't have a whole lot of precedent in the game. So EFM wise, it was a little bit slippery.
So
still not done, obviously.
Well, I guess the question I have for all of you is in working with these guys, how difficult have you found it to take their feedback and make it tangible? Because with my own working with Polychop on the 58, sometimes it's hard to articulate what I'm feeling or not feeling, and trying to put that in words that they can then say, oh, okay, this is what we need to tweak. So how have you guys found that process? Is it confusing? Is it frustrating?
Yeah, I think it depends a lot on the subject matter expert specifically, right? Some people are really good at articulating that stuff in ways that are easy to translate into code, and some people aren't. And so you spend more time with the people that are more articulate. But at least where we tried to start is fundamentally the DCS EFM system is a table-based flight model. And so what that means is for different speeds and different areas of the control envelope, there are values that correspond to what the plane should do, right? It should go up, it should slow down, it should have drag, lift, whatever. And so what we went out and did is looked for actual charts that showed what the plane ought to do in terms of climb out, or what it ought to do in terms of drag. Does it have Dutch roll characteristics, those kinds of things, and then actually say, okay, well, like when we put ours in a 20-degree climb and put it to full power, like does it match the chart? And so I think like having a baseline like that makes it a lot easier to contextualize that kind of feedback. But it's hard work.
It's
and the
very
sim
challenging.
doesn't provide any kind of native tools
Right.
for that. I think it's something people don't understand is like it's like other flight sims, like it's like a full physics kind of based environment. Like you drop an object and it falls kind of thing. In DCS, if you drop an object and you want it to fall, you have to write C++ code to make it go down. So it's which means the possibilities are kind of endless, but but that's all work you have to do yourself.
Yeah. With the T-45, we've got about a dozen IPs, instructor pilots, students, current people flying the jet or have flown the jet. We have maintainers who are telling us power plant curves and run-up charts. We've got a wealth of data for the T-45, firsthand knowledge that's been passed to us. And people who are going to be listening to this are going, well, yeah, the jet doesn't fly anything like the real T-45 right now, and we are aware of that. It definitely has some shortcomings, but you also don't have our newest flight model, which is not public, which we're continually tuning, which has more of the things like the often criticized lack of pitch buck.
Pitch buck, yeah. Does it pitch buck?
If I get that question one more time, let me just put it out here. We're aware of it. We have been told from the people who fly the jet that yes, it is a tendency of the aircraft, but it is not essential to flying the aircraft and making it perform the way that it needs to perform to be useful. And that's all I'll say about that. But like I said, we have an internal flight model that we are tuning to be more realistic right now. And I guarantee you, if we had released the more realistic flight model, everyone would have trashed the jet because it is a handful of a jet. It wants to kill you. And we wanted to make something that was a little bit more, and I'm not saying that it's a kid gloves version of the jet, but what we focused on was the lower end performance envelope of the jet around the boat because we knew that's what people wanted to do. So the plane is more tuned for that lower third to half flight envelope of the jet, just so people are aware. And I don't know if I made this clear enough by releasing it, but that's what we focused on with this version that is currently the version 1.01 that's out in the wild right now. And so I get messages daily still of people who are like, I flew the jet yesterday and your flight model is not good. And I was like, okay, context is really important here. And like Matt just said, it is really challenging to put together an EFM that behaves exactly like the flight characteristics of a real jet in this simulator. It's very challenging. The people who have done it well, that have retail modules like the F-14, are wizards and are really, really good at what they do in interpreting actual flight performance data to actual code implementation. And I love that jet, and there are jets that hit the mark and still don't hit the mark, even as third-party retail modules. And so it is definitely an ongoing thing. I mean, how many years into the F-18 development are we right now? And the flight model is still being tuned. Just keep that in mind, is they're still tweaking that flight model.
Well, the ability for the community to bitch and moan about things that are free will never, I'll never be able to fathom it. But at the end of the day, I think that what also has to be acknowledged, just like you said, it's almost impossible to really capture every aspect of something that flies in DCS or really any game
simulator.
Did you just call it a game? Did you just call it a game?
But I did.
My God,
I did.
I gotta leave
Flame
right
me,
now.
Fire away. Yeah.
I'm out the door.
But and even real military simulators are, we fly them and it's like, this is terrible. Like, this doesn't feel anything like the real aircraft. But with that being said, regardless where you stand on it's a game, it's a simulation, you still have to make it fun. And so I think what a lot of people, particularly in the helicopter side, don't understand is like, it takes a long time to learn how to hover, for instance. If I sell you a game simulator, whatever, and you can't do something with it the first day or two, you're probably never going to pick it up again. So it's got to be like something that somebody can buy and enjoy relatively quickly. They have to get really good at this in order to do the very basics with it. Most people want to pick it up and play it. And so I think with these mods and really with third parties and everybody, they just have to find that balance between it's realistic but also playable, and you can have fun with it when you're
Absolutely.
16. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
good
I mean,
point.
there's a reason why auto start exists, because you
yes,
know
for
what?
me, yes.
If you buy the A10 and you sit in the A10 for the first
Yeah.
time and you look down at all the switches and you go, how in the hell do I start this thing
Yeah.
up? I mean, I'll be honest with you. The first time I sat in that A10 years and years ago when I started playing DCS before VR, I looked at that thing and I went, I'm good. I'll be back in a few years.
Yep.
And you guys bring up a really good point, and the main reason why I wanted to kickstart this whole chat on the podcast is I feel like a good portion of the vitriol that the community gets is due to the fact that the community doesn't quite understand what goes into making a mod. And I mean, there will always be haters. I learned that with the T45 release. You know, no matter what you do, people will hate on it.
Yep.
But I feel like a good portion of the hate is due to the fact that people don't know what goes into making a mod and the difficulties of making a mod, and also the fact that the code is quite hostile to non-third party modders. And I'm hoping that this podcast and better communication of non-third party modders to the community will assuage at least a portion of the hate that gets tossed our way.
Yeah, I'm open to discuss what it takes to put some of these mods together. If somebody wants to know why something is the way it is, I have no issue engaging them and walking through some things. But the moment that they claim to be an expert, and I know that they've never flown a plane, I'm a general aviation. I know there's people in here who fly commercially or are enlisted or have flown the jets or helicopters. And those are the people that we engage, because I am not an expert on the T-45. I know quite a bit about the aircraft now. But when I need to know when the plane stalls in this specific configuration, I don't guess. I literally message one of a half dozen test pilots I have who've flown the real jet or currently flying and say, give me some feedback, walk me through what happens when the plane does this, and then we try and model it in the flight model data. That is literally what we're doing with our jet to the best of our ability.
I think it's another good point about like why this is an interesting thing to do though, is like, yeah, I'm not, a pilot. I've never sat in a C-130, but now I know a lot about it. And like, if you find that process interesting, learning about, the intricacies of how these systems work, these really complicated systems, then, you'll enjoy this.
So I got a question here. So for Particle Man, so you're talking about like, you have all these real pilots that tell you like it stalls at this speed, this configuration. How do you put that into code? I have no idea where to even start.
Well, like Matt said, the flight models in the EFMs are table based. So the more granular, there's no limit. And Matt, please step in and correct me if I'm wrong here, because I don't personally tune the flight model on the T-45. I'm the project manager, the art director, and the creative director on the project. So I'm dangerous in Lua and C++. I don't claim to be an expert in any of those, but you can add as much granularity as you have insight into that flight model table data. So the more detail and the more data points you pump into it, the more accurate it's going to be. And that's why when you fly an SFM compared to an EFM, if you put the plane into a stall configuration, you will notice that an SFM will just freeze midair. Like if you put it into a vertical climb and it runs out of airspeed, usually an SFM will just stick there for a few seconds before it like breaks and tumbles and falls back before it starts flying again. With our EFM data, we tried to, because the plane needed to be really accurate in how it performed in its slow speed, dirty configuration for carrier landings, we made sure that, we had a lot more data in that lower end of the flight model so that stalls would be more realistic, so that the plane wouldn't just freeze. It would break. It would stall a wing left or right. It had asymmetric lift. And so, for those of you who have flown an aircraft, you can stall one wing before another one, and that's where you get the roll before it'll start flying again and pick up. So that's the kind of granularity you can get of the expertise of an engineer who can do that based on the feedback of the performance data from a real test pilot. And we've been given charts that, here's how the plane should fly at 2,000 feet, AGL, standard temperature, standard pressure. going this configuration, here's what I should hit, and we tune the engine for that, or we tune the drag or the lifts and all those kind of things. So it's definitely a juggling act to get all those things tuned out. And again, we have no wind tunnel to test this performance, and it's changing values. I mean, in a spreadsheet essentially.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard because like maybe an example with the Herc is like our last release. People notice that the pitch authority was just way too great. The plane has pretty good pitch authority like at lower speeds, but then you get going 350 knots, and you could like loop the plane just like in comically short amounts of distance. And so like the EFM API lets you do whatever you want, but it's not going to build in any kind of drop off based on drag. Those are things where you have to say in your code, okay, look, it's not a fly-by-wire plane. You'd have to be insanely strong to be able to hold the yoke back at 3 Gs or whatever. And to make it enjoyable to fly, you have to just put a plug in there and say at 4 Gs you don't get any more control authority. Those kinds of things that are part of the trade-off, because people are flying with like a Thrustmaster Warthog or something, right? Whereas the actual plane has this huge heavy control column, and you can't just yank it back and just give it full control authority, whereas you can with your joystick. And so finding ways to
Trigger can, because he went to the gym.
Yeah, I went to the gym,
exactly.
so I'll pull that thing back.
Yeah. Nice.
But yeah, no.
One thing I want to reiterate, and I hope we're kind of putting this across. All of this is an immense amount of work. Not all of it is necessarily fun, done by hobbyists on their free time. So this stuff takes time, a lot of time to get done right.
Yeah.
So, okay, I guess I kind of got a question for all the developers here. What would you say the hardest thing is? So, like a new guy's coming into mod. So, like, hey, dumb tricker's coming into mod. What would be like your advice? Like, what is the hardest thing that I can experience if I'm going to make an airplane?
Flight model.
Yeah, the flight model is by far the hardest thing, because the way that it works requires you to actually understand aerodynamics. And I didn't know that. I'm not, an aerodynamics expert. But
how did you learn though?
The internet. I think anybody that writes code knows that Google is your friend here. In all things software, but especially this. I mean, I spend all kinds of time now, reading about, different aerodynamic concepts or, geometry. I mean, like there's
flight
just
dynamics.
There's so yeah. So you end up doing a lot of trigonometry too. It's like I think I would have been better at this if I had started doing it as like a 11th grader.
You mean I didn't pay
was
attention
taking
in high school?
geometry? Yeah, well, you might be surprised, but I have forgotten most of geometry. But now I've remembered it, because you spend a huge amount of time doing trig to sort of represent some set of numbers in some particular way. Radians, degrees, cosines, all that kind of stuff. You spend a huge amount of time doing.
Also, keep in mind that EFM is a relatively new aspect to non-third-party modding. And a lot of the progress that has been made is due to shared effort and collaboration. And this is something that I would say even before this year, you would find very, very rare amongst mods in DCS.
Real quick, too, to your point, Matt, is I think you're not going to succeed trying to become a third-party developer, or a mod developer in general, even a third-party developer, if you don't have a passion for going out there and researching and learning that kind of stuff. Like if you're like, oh, it's just, I'm just going to go find some numbers and plug them in, it's not going to work. And then, if that's as far as you're willing to go, you're not going to be successful. You're going to have a passion for that kind of stuff. And, that's kind of a thing amongst developers. We like to research the why.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you don't, you'll just suck at it, and
Yeah, exactly.
that's fine. But the people that are good at this kind of stuff are people that really enjoy it, and that probably
Yeah.
a technical.
Yeah,
career.
and also back to the point about you guys talking about plugging the numbers in the tables, this altitude and this speed and blah blah blah, and trying to get a fine granularity as far as how the EFM works at those various configurations. It occurred to me that you probably only have so much flight data to deal with in the first place. You're looking at those charts, the T-45 is probably not flying up at 40,000, 50,000 feet in those charts to give you those numbers. And yet we have people in DCS that do the same. And then they're like,
and
why
that's
does
where the community roasts you? Yeah, you get roasted for the edge of the envelope.
Yeah, and they're
things,
like, why does it fly like a UFO when I get up to 50,000 feet? I increase to Mach 3 in a T-45. And you're like,
That's because you can shoot a Fox 3 missile 80,000 miles at 50,000 feet.
That's right. That's right, at Mach 2.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that applies to even in the past, some of the third-party stuff. Like the Mirage 2000, I remember back in the day, like 1.5, when that thing was out, you could fly up to like 60,000 feet and become, Mach 3 and fire off a missile and just annihilate people with at a range that, they couldn't hit you at. And then the same things happened in the Viggen, and the same things happened in the F-14. People go up to these altitudes, and I'm betting. I don't know for sure, but I'm betting they just left data out of the tables for that because they didn't have data for it, and so they had to go make something up when the community did that.
I mean, a lot of it's like just not even planning for it. I mean, when we say tables, it's not literally. I mean, I guess you could do it like literally as a table, but I think most of that is just not even anticipating what people are going to do with the plane, and those are the cases where like. You have to kind of be defensive about it and say, like, how could I prevent the plane from doing certain truly insane things at any point, so that you don't get someone on YouTube putting up a video like, hey, look, the Hercules can I don't know, do a Pugachev's Cobra or something, and so therefore these guys suck, which like is for sure not the analysis.
So I mean, real quick, like that was in our verse 1.0 version release, people were flying the T-45 up to, like you said, 50,000 feet and hitting like Mach 1 point whatever. But, in our 1.1 release, we built in I'm not going to say accurate, but we built in an engine performance curve at altitude. So now the jet can't do that any longer and is more realistic. But again, like you said, you're talking about people doing the 5% performance envelope that we weren't designing the aircraft for. And so it's just a matter of adding those data sets, adding those performance curves in to limit the lift fall off for the thinner air, the engine. We know they exist, and there's some data in there, but the full extent of it, like I said, just comes with time.
Do you have something, Trigger?
So thanks for all the I was gonna say thanks for all the information on the flight model. That was a lot to take in. But I was kind of curious, Breadmaker, you're the 3D modelist.
Yep, that's right.
So take us through, like, what do you do to make it look good?
You 3D model the plane and then you put it in DCS. No,
just like that. All right, next question.
You asked.
The man coming in with the tough questions.
I want to say first, I'm not actually a 3D modeler by trade. I do it in my free time, and I'm self-taught. And on our model for the Gripen, it's actually a combination of 3D models that we have made ourselves, and then also 3D models that we have acquired and have got like permission to use that other people have created. So the most work I've done on the Gripen is actually animation. But also some 3D modeling. But yeah, basically you take a 3D software. You can use. I don't know if you can use any software. I think the official one is 3ds Max.
Yeah,
I personally use
Blender. I think there's a plugin for Blender. Yeah.
Yeah, I personally use Blender actually. But we have other people in our team that uses 3ds. There are some limitations in Blender right now. Some things that you either can't do or that's pretty tricky to do. So 3ds Max is the way to go, but it's very, very expensive. So for someone who doesn't work with it, it's too expensive. But yeah, you basically make a model of a plane or an object, IKEA, a meatball, whatever. And the way I see it, since it's supposed to be in a simulator, you might want to make like as realistic and as close to the real plane that you want. But that's also up to personal preference. If it's going to be an AI plane, for example, that's not going to be seen up close ever, then it could be a little less detailed maybe. But yeah, you make the 3D model and then you use a plugin. I think it's a plugin for 3ds Max also. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. But yeah, there's a plugin that converts the 3D model to an EDM file, which is the file format that DCS uses. And that EDM file contains a bunch of information. What type of object is this? Is it like a 3D object, or is it like a node object that isn't actually visible but that has some kind of function? Is it a light? What material does it have? Does it have animation? And then there's variables attached to those animations and so on and so on. So yeah, you make a 3D object, but that's the start. Then you start adding EDM functions on that. And then you connect those EDM functions to code, basically, and then it works.
And then you got to put textures on top of that.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, you don't stop it. You don't stop at the model. Then you have to do something called UV unwrapping, which is basically cutting the 3D model into a 2-dimensional representation, which is what it becomes the paint kit. And then you have to take the model over to another program to do all the realistic texturing, like we did with I did with the T45, and take it over to Substance Painter, and you put all the weathering on it. You do all the base coats of all the surfaces and how they reflect and how they should, be the tires, the gear, all of that stuff, the lights, like Brett was saying. And then you bring it back, and then I handed it off to 2 livery painters, so I didn't need to do that myself, which was great because they could just go in there and start painting up all the realistic liveries we wanted to release with the initial 45. But there's definitely a back and forth and a lot of revisions, just like anything with the 3D modeling is. We created the T45 from scratch, so that model is brand new. And so we own all the rights to it. So we had to do every step of the process of the initial lock-ins to the bakes to the unwraps to all the animation and rigging and everything to hook up for the code was completely from scratch for that plane. It's a lot of work.
Would it be easier if DCS ran inside of like Unity or like one of the big like game engines? Would that simplify the process on the model side?
I mean, I will tell you this. I've actually brought our T45 into Unreal Engine. And other than flipping because that's actually where my experience is. I've been making games for 20 years and I do Unreal. And so I wanted to see if I could get it in there. Other than flipping the metal and roughness channels because they're flipped in DCS from standards, it slotted right in. I will have to reanimate and re-rig everything, which I haven't done, but the plane slots in and renders perfectly fine in Unreal. So we're actually doing some experiments in Unreal with it right now.
Now, there's one thing you Particle can attest to is as an art director, sometimes you need to make a decision. Do you want a certain piece of detail to be made 3D wise, or do you want it being made texture wise?
Yeah. I actually on our project I mostly worked on the cockpit, and I worked closely with another guy on the team, and we used a priority list, and we based that priority list on how often are you going to look at this part and how much and how well are you going to see it. So like a screw that's on the back side of the ejection seat, you're never going to see it. That doesn't have to be detailed. It probably doesn't have to be there. But like the buttons on the UFC, you're going to look at them all the time. They need to look good.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing too that we're experimenting with the T45 is, and I'm sure people are aware of this, if you exactly to what Breadmaker just said, is you put the detail and the effort into the things that are going to be used the most. Your priorities for all your consoles and your instrumentation and the MFDs and whatnot, that everybody's going to be looking at 100% of the time, put your effort. So, things like the ejection seat, which, yeah, you're going to arm the ejection seat and safe it and whatever, but our ejection seat is just an off-the-shelf ejection seat that I bought because I knew that I was eventually going to have the ability to replace that with a photogrammetry version of the ejection seat at some point down the road. It was on the list to do. So that ejection seat that's in there is temp right now. And so we've been experimenting with going out and shooting the real ejection seat that's in the plane, and then building a and this is what Heat Blur has done. Is Heat Blur actually went out and shot the F-14 ejection seats and then basically baked them into a lower poly real-time model. And that's why their stuff looks so good, is because it's the real thing. And that's another step in the process of 3D modeling to make it look more believable and more realistic.
It's a lot of work. A lot of work for sure.
It's a lot of work.
I wanted to give a chance to Matt. We talked a lot about the T-45 and also the Gripen. Matt, we haven't really talked much about your plane. Do you want to let everybody know about what you guys have and maybe what's been going on with it and what we can expect?
Yeah. I mean, so we have a C-130, and that's a big cargo plane. And the cool thing about the Herc, at least like from a multiplayer, like gameplay perspective, is that it kind of opens up whole different gameplay types to DCS that kind of didn't really exist before. I think like anybody that's ever played like on the GAW servers, like you want to go cap the base, and so you go to this radio command and you select like send cargo plane, and like half the time it crashes and it always flies from like some weird base that's 45 minutes away, and just kind of the realism is not really there. And so that's kind of, it's one of the big things for us that it adds is, the ability for an actual player to jump into the cockpit and, load up, a tank or a bunch of infantry, physically fly to a base and drop those off, or do airdrops with SAMs. Those are all things that you can do with the mod. And so it's, I think that's just the big selling point for us, is just that it's totally unique. There's really nothing else like it in the game, paid or otherwise. In terms of like what's coming, we'll see. We're going to have a release in the next couple weeks here, where radios ought to be working, and some really neat navigational features that the real plane has. And then, after that, we'll just see what the future holds.
Pretty cool. I actually have yet to try out that mod. I keep telling myself I need to try it, and I saw that they added support for it in.
Dude, it's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it looks amazing. I'd have a hard time installing mods just because I have to download them, and it sounds like a little bit of work.
It's
You really cop folder into a different folder.
I'm joking. I'm just lazy.
The features that Matt has coded into the project are just the ability to troops, cargo loads. It's so cool. It's so worth the time. I love flying that plane. I love messing with that plane. It's one of the things that I fly more. If I'm not flying the T-45 or just screwing around, I'll go and fly that thing because I love
definitely
it so
check
much.
it out. I was going to say it looked like they added support for it in the DCS Liberation campaign.
I didn't even know that.
So that kind of opened my eyes. I was like, oh, I wonder how useful it would be during that, because I usually do that once or twice a week.
Like it gives you the ability to actually place large ground assets and have a real ground war in a way that just kind of didn't really exist before. The mission that I maintain, what we added was like we took away all the weapons stores basically at the bases that you might capture, and you got to do resupplies, right? And it totally changes the way that people engage with stores, right? People aren't all of a sudden loading up 10 AMRAMs, or jettisoning them on the way back to RTB because they can fly a little faster without the drag. So you get in the Herc, you load up a bunch of Fox 3s, and you fly, from some other base in Syria, and drop them off at the the forward base that you just capped. And it's a level of immersion and fun that has just totally transformed, the missions that I've worked on. But it's just something that's pleasing from the game, and especially if you've got like a dynamic campaign that might be released sometime this century. You could imagine that being really compelling in an environment like that as well. You're kind of hamstrung in some ways with the resupply stuff because there's no like warehousing API in the game really, so you can't make it persist. But even still, it's an absolute blast.
That's cool. Yeah, I'll definitely have to check that out. It is on my to-do list for sure. I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up there. It's been very interesting 1.5 hours we've been talking now, and I'm sure we can go on for more, so we'll probably have to have you guys back. I have some questions that I feel like we're going to be some lengthy discussions, so I don't want to get into them right now. But man, we covered a lot of stuff, and I really appreciate all you guys,
of course,
tuning or joining, and
Thank you.
then also everybody who's going to listen later. I'm sure we'll have questions. So if anybody has questions for these guys, you can join their Discords and ask. You can feel free to ask them in the Air Combat Sim Podcast Discord, and we can get them answered as quickly as possible. And yeah, I mean, this has been an awesome discussion. Go ahead.
I got one more quick question for Bread Maker. What makes a good Swedish meatball? Like, give me the ingredient.
A good Swedish meatball, it needs to be Mamma Scan meatballs. Yeah, that's the secret.
So what is it?
It's a brand, a Swedish brand.
Yeah, I was
it's
gonna say, I think a brand of
it's horse meat.
meatball.
Yeah.
You got to start with the right meat tricker.
Oh,
The Gripen is actually almost everything on the Gripen is classified, and part of that classification is the Swedish meatball recipe. So yeah, sorry, can't help you.
Well, I do appreciate the sense of humor.
All right, guys. Well, thanks again, and we'll have to have you guys back on. I really did enjoy all of that. Very insightful, and hopefully you get some more community people who listen to this and get interested, and we get more stuff going. It'd be cool.
Don, thanks for the invite.
Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, it was an absolute pleasure. Had a good time.
Thanks for listening to Air Combat Sim. Don't forget to subscribe or tell a friend about it. You have a question, idea for an episode, or a special guest you'd like us to invite? Feel free to reach out on Facebook, Discord, or via email. Air Combat Sim was brought to you by BVR Productions.